This podcast is based around the history and experiences of the infamous Shane Bugbee, recollected and retold by Shane Bugbee himself. Who is Shane? Well, you're about to find out. I'm your host, Nannerl, and this is Speak of the Devil.
You are the company you keep. It's one of those colloquials you hear often growing up. But when you're in the same room as someone, do you become that person? Do those people become you? And where is the line when it's the company you keep versus you doing your work? I'm Nannerl, and today we're going to talk about the alt-right and co-opting Satanism and everything in between. Hi, Shane!
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm worried that we're talking about this because it's hard to phrase anything in this context without being called a dog whistler or something of that nature. As you know, I'm dog whistling, so it causes me tension and stress, to be honest with you. My association with that stuff has caused me to have traumas since 2016 even, especially after that election. We can go into it further. I don't want to get a rambling start to this, but there it is, setting off my traumas, my triggers.
A slight warning to our listeners as well. This is probably one of our more problematic episodes, if you would like to use that word. We are going to talk today about the alt-right, neo-Nazis, people who identify as white supremacists, and others who are quite controversial. We do not condone these activities, but talking about them I think is quite important. And it's hard to talk about a topic without mentioning their affiliations, what they are, and just be warned that if you are offended by this subject matter, perhaps this episode is not for you.
Yeah. You know, there's a great meme that was going around that I shared on my Instagram that I'm trying to pull up real quick that I really like, that I felt it gave me a lot of relief in my contemplating what I had done by giving people a mic or a stage or whatever. And it's a photo, an illustration of a horse, the wooden horse, and the Trojan horse. Mm-hmm. It's basically an illustration of that, and it's the Trojan horse is labeled funny edginess, and inside the Trojan horse it says literal Nazism, and then below the person presenting the Trojan horse is a totally apolitical web star, and then the gate is mentally fragile young men and politically confused people. So does that make sense as I explained it? The gate,
yes. The
Trojan horse is trying to break down the mentally fragile young men and politically confused people. And that's how I saw myself, was the totally apolitical web star. Back in the day of Radio Free Satan and stuff, I was pretty apolitical. I was just angry. And so when I presented a lot of these ideas, I was presenting angry motherfuckers and trying to understand that. And I'm for free speech and I'm for people expressing themselves and stuff like that. But there wasn't as much thought as I have as a wise old person today, is to think you really don't want to give a forum to people who don't want people to have a forum, who aren't into free speech. You can't really, Nazis in the political party sense, not in calling people names. But that political philosophy does not believe in free speech. So when you give them free speech, you are, cutting off your own legs at some point, if they were to gain power, that is. So I don't know.
What makes someone a Nazi?
Well, they're affiliated. A Nazi is a political group, so it's just like a Democrat or a Republican. It's someone who subscribes to a political philosophy, believes in that philosophy, the rules of that philosophy. maybe they take it religious at some point. They become a Nazi, and that has it's rooted in fascism. It's an offshoot of fascism that has their own set of rules, which is racial purity and other things.
So going along with how it's basically you're saying it's based on the abbreviated term National Socialist.
Right.
Where the term comes from originally.
Right.
Okay. So someone can be, say, another controversial person, say a white supremacist, a Klansman, anything like that, without being a Nazi. They are not necessarily a Nazi.
Certainly. And I think within that, there's a lot of people that say things that are racist, but they're ignorant. They don't realize what they're still exploring the world. So a lot of younger people are saying things that are actually racist, and they need to be schooled in that. And they make, they have a heart. And I don't think they subscribe to a Nazi political ideal. And I don't even know if they believe white people are supreme, as in, a supreme race. But they'll say something that's racist just to be mean, just because they want to hurt someone's feelings. I think those are all different things. They are different things. I don't have to think about it. And when people lump everything together, like he's a Nazi, I mean, like he's just an ignorant juggalo, or he's just an ignorant metalhead. That's not a Nazi. Nazis are well thought out. They have a political ideal that they're pushing. This kid is just ignorant. You water down what a Nazi is, which is a very dangerous political theory for most. It's a very, very dangerous political theory, versus an ignorant person is not going to be very dangerous usually. Or they can be, I guess, but they're not part of this group, of this very big group, or not big, but a group of people that are looking to seize governmental power.
I think that the areas that are small towns, say in the Midwest, Middle America, the South, it's quite easy for it to be conventional, or at least never corrected, to say things that are straight up ignorant. Especially if you live in a bubble. Your parents speak that way. Everyone at your school speaks that way. And if you don't know any better, you are always experimenting with how you speak. The minute that you're in a different environment and someone tells you, hey man, don't say that, or they just yell at you or punch you in the face or whatever, it's sort of like touching the stove for the first time and realizing it's hot.
Yeah, I did a lot of stuff. I said some rude things on podcasts back in the early days of podcasts that have come back to be questioned. And I think along those same terms, we were still isolated. The internet wasn't what it is today, where you can get the clapbacks are immediate. You're going to have immediate education based on what you're saying. And I don't know if so it's just a different thing. I think that small town thing has even changed with the internet, where people understand if they communicate that they're going to get a response immediately. And a lot of times now it's like, you're going to be shunned.
You're going to be doxed.
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 Yeah. Or canceled.
Yes.
Cancel, which I'm just learning about what that is, cancel culture, which is very weird. What a weird thing.
I think that the word Nazi is almost being thrown around the same way that the word poser was thrown around, or hater, in 2010. Yeah.
Okay.
It's sort of becoming a cheapened word, where it's losing its meaning, and it's blurring the lines of what truly is dangerous and what isn't dangerous. So, for example, if somebody on the internet opposed, say, antifa, they are suddenly a Nazi. Or if they said something in defense of someone who was a hard right, who was opposed by Antifa, and they say something in that person's defense, or to be fair, or something like that, they are suddenly a Nazi. And I think that throwing that word like that, you're just substituting it because you're not using the right word.
Right, you water down what a Nazi is, which is a very dangerous political ideal, right? But I also see, like saying that person's hard right, calling them a Nazi is misuse of that word, and that word should stay dangerous, the word Nazi. But I would say, like, in these times, things are so split, you do have to choose a side. Sitting in the middle isn't a real good thing. And so for me, I would call that person an asshole. Like, you're an asshole, and I probably don't choose to talk to you too much. Like, a lot of people in my family voted for Trump. Now, I haven't talked to them in over a decade, but they're revealing this to me, and I'm like, oh, God, I don't talk to Trump people. I'm like, what? You won't talk? I'm like, right, I don't talk. Oh, that's pretty bullshit. And I'm like, no, actually, it keeps my sanity. We are so split in this country right now that we don't really have much to say if you can't see this person as an ignorant leader, or whatever you want to call him. Like, I'm just whatever. Maybe I'm blinded by things, but I'm so opposed to that way of thinking. I have nothing to say to you, especially if you're a poor white person. Like, are you kidding me? You have no reason to vote for that guy. Like, he's not for poor people.
It's sort of the same thing as people who follow Richard Spencer and other, top dog figures in the alt-right who I would call Richard Spencer a Nazi. And, people like that, where you are not cut from the same cloth as these people. These people are like college graduate. He went to Duke University or something like that. He's a college graduate. He is read. He holds these conferences on a podium. Doesn't this sound kind of like another lobbyist group holding conferences on podiums for people with a Harvard graduate? Kind of the same thing. And it's pandering to people who are kind of left out, marginalized on the fringes, who feel misunderstood. They're angry, like you were saying, ignorant, angry people, and they feel like, oh man, I can be part of this fraternity. I can be part of this boys club. And they wouldn't have otherwise been part of anything like that.
An Ivy League education definitely weaponizes a political theory. And that is it does, like free speech to me isn't something and I'm really hard pressed to talk and try to define free speech, but there's different layers to everything. We have different layers. We're nuanced human beings. We're nuanced circumstantial human existence we live. And so within that, free speech is okay for a human being, an individual to express, like between me and you. It's not even on this podcast, I think, just me and you hanging out. We should be able to talk about anything we want without repercussion. Now, when we start publishing it and stuff like that, there probably is some responsibility that you have there. And when you have an Ivy League education and you're broadcasting your opinions, there's a different obligation that you have there, just like the pay grade. When you have that Ivy League education, you're going to get paid a lot more than the juggler or the other people. So it's like, then you should be treated with different responsibilities then too. If you get a different pay raise, a different pay grade because of the Ivy League education, don't you have a higher responsibility when you communicate, versus like, oh, this is just free speech. And I think you're right with Richard Spencer. Like, he's a person who's taken a philosophy or thoughts, and he makes gray areas and with his brand of socialism, which he's basically has tried to embrace socialism ideals. Like, no, we're good with this. We're good, good with certain things Bernie Sanders is saying, let's say. Knowing that his political theory is dangerous for most Americans.
Yes. Yeah. It's the same with anything that regards, it's just a rebranded thing. These American identity, or European identity groups, things like that claim to preserve. It feels quite dangerous and weaponized because it's posed in that sort of textbook, History Channel, scholar way, versus, say, and this is going to sound really shitty that I'm comparing the two like this, but versus, say, the KKK and 14 words. I'm actually not quite familiar with the history of 14 words and how it is used, but am I to understand that that's not quite the same as Nazis still?
No, it's an offshoot of something like that, though. It's an offshoot of Nazis.
Okay.
You know, they're rebranding themselves, but I would say they're very similar.
Oh, okay. Then I stand corrected.
But they're based in more Odinism. Odin, you know, it's a combination of other beliefs, much like other sects of Christianity, let's say. So it's like a sect of fascism.
It's an origin story of whiteness, is what I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, right.
It's quite interesting also as someone of Japanese descent, hearing how people speak this way. And in Japan, it's quite a homogenous culture. And this is again controversial, but this kind of thought is not as dangerous in places like Japan. Because we are a diverse culture, it is dangerous. We aren't equipped to be homogenous in America. And it both fascinates and frightens me how many people who fit into these dangerous groups here in the States idealize Japanese culture and Japanese people because of the homogeny there, the preservation of Japanese culture. And listener, before you call me a jingoist or nationalist for Japan or anything like that, you should know that I am darker than a paper bag.
Sounds...
I know, it's kind of hard thing to respond to, but do you know what?
It is.
I didn't realize the fascination with Japan that a lot of the alt-right has until very recently. And it made me feel very gross because it goes both ways. On one side, I've been called a race traitor by Asian Americans, and I've been called, you know, the one with the white husband and things like that by Japanese expats, and all kinds of circles seen as, you know, I've heard the word milk tiger and other phrases that basically imply that I have a fetish toward white people and I've betrayed my heritage. But then on the other side, my husband gets called yellow fever and all these other things of being a fetishist. And so it kind of sickens me that these dangerous people truly actually fetishize this. And it does kind of give other people a bad rap.
It is certainly strange that people can't live and be themselves in this society. And I don't know about this world, but in this American life, it is truly a success if you get a sliver of yourself, to live yourself at all. All those names you're called is just, it's bizarre, but I've been called a race traitor and I've heard that stuff plenty. And, you know, I've also in my life had to deal with like growing up in that stuff and having it affect my opinion, like, and understanding like at some point, am I just threatened by the concept of what I was sold a black man is, let's say, which is a big football player, this big dominant, someone that's really bigger and, you know, tolerant. So am I just insecure that the version of a black person that was sold to me is this huge monstrous creature that plays basketball or football? You know, as a kid growing up, that's the black person you were able to see on TV. And then Urkel comes along, right? And you see a black nerd on TV. And so, and by the time Urkel came along, I had been living my life. I'd lived with a black family and saw that, they're all shapes and sizes too. Look at this. This is amazing. Because whatever, kids, we didn't have the internet back in my day. We had 3 channels of TV, and this is what you were sold. This is the Black experience that was piped into my house was they are sports figures. This is what they were. And so so that's just interesting to me. Like the insecurity I had growing up with that is thinking, there was an insecurity. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying. And the creating a fetish out of a race of person. I don't understand it personally. I have my own personal fetishes, but they fluctuate based on my mood. I'm not really stuck in any one thing. So it's hard for me, maybe it's the way I think, but it's hard for me to understand fetishes that people are stuck in anyway. But to be called that on the street, like you're saying, is like, how do you think you know me in my bedroom? It's so offensive. It's almost like being called a faggot or anything. Like growing up, I was called a faggot because I played piano. I tried to take piano lessons, and people were like, you faggot. And I was like, I just had to think, like, it was such a bizarre concept. Like, how would you know what I think about in my own home, in my bedroom? Like, how would you know? Why would you say that?
Stack these blocks in the corner and make music with them.
Yeah, I just wanted to play piano because I thought it was cool. Like, I thought that was cool to me. Everyone made me feel uncool about it. Like, it was like, oh man, toxic male culture I grew up in. It's just the way it is. If you're not, we had very limited goals, be big, be strong, be dominant.
Piano lessons is what the girls do. Right. And I'm glad I survived through that stuff and found who I was. That's where, like I'm an artist, so I am a sensitive person. I can be all of these things, and that's a great life to be all of it, be sensitive and be masculine, be strong and weak, The yin and yang of life is be wonderful. If that's how I don't know if I'm using that term correctly, but I always take it as what was the show? Above and below. It's the balance.
What was the show we were about to do? The contrarian. So it's that whole thing, the contrarian of life, the hypocrisy of your own life. It's hard not. I think being a hypocrite is a good thing in most regards. Where you're growing, you're like, it's hard to be so static with politics, with anything, I think. But you can be a liar, and a hypocritical liar is not a good thing. That's different. But I think the growth, I don't know, that the contrary of life, the contradiction of life is wonderful to me.
I think that some of these ways people see something fetishized versus not fetishized or race traitor, things like that, is sometimes because one group ruins it for everybody. But on the other side of it, sometimes it's a piece of insecurity. And sometimes it doesn't come from people like the alt-right. Sometimes it does come from the other side as well. And it's very troubling sometimes where people are...
What comes from the other side? The picking on people for fetishizing or fetishizing?
Policing what is fetishizing and what isn't. Okay. For example, I've also heard people refer to my husband as my oppressor. And these people were not alt-righty people at all. They seemed like very left people. Progressives, per se. And before you come at me also, if I had to identify as one thing or another and label myself, I would call myself progressive. But it's interesting. I've heard people have side notes about, like other women have side notes about my husband opening the door for me, carrying things for me, because I am petite and can't hold much. And if someone's gonna hold my bags and all my stuff and let me just swing my arms and walk, I'm going to take that offer. But for some reason, that's seen as oppressing me for some reason. Someone else got to decide it for me, that this fetishizing oppressive male is treating me like a living doll, when in reality it sounds like it sounds more like a problem within them about themselves more than a problem with us.
I can see that. I definitely can see that. And then I can see it 10 years down the road where people have said things like that. And it was like, wow, someone was trying to warn me about that. Having gone through, I'm in the 25-year marriage. I've heard things like that and thought they were ridiculous. And then I looking at them as I'm getting out of that marriage, looking at them like, wow, maybe that was an epic warning I'd failed to take in. This brings me to the concept of whatever gets you through the night. People say that, like, whatever gets you through the night. And I used to, like, that's like a fun little thing, but that's sort of bullshit. Like, what if getting me through the night's beating the shit out of someone, like, really hurting someone, really being abusive, and that gets me through the night. And even, like, that's a weird, I just don't believe we're fully evolved as the species that we should be or can be, because that's a weird concept to let something that is, no matter which way you look at it, perverse. Mm-hmm. It's same as like the incestuous pornography we were talking about off mic. As a person who's worked in the porn world, I know plenty of weird fetishes, and some of them are uncomfortable. And they're uncomfortable because I wrote a book about this. I wrote some poetry about this, or whatever you want to call it, poetry. Wrote some stuff about this, where it's like rape fantasies. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I can go into this fetishes. I'm not going to go into this. I'm getting triggered out by all this kind of stuff, I think.
This kind of segs back into what we were talking about, though, regarding, controversial people on the right, is what gets you through the night. There's a big difference between what gets you through the night is feeling like you are superior because you are a white person versus acting upon it and hurting other people because you feel like you are superior, or spreading disinformation to hope that people would be okay if other people are murdered.
I like how you did that. This transition right into this right here.
But that's also, like, I kind of had to twist and turn the words, just like someone's words can be twisted into being a Nazi. Someone's words could be twisted around, and they could be easily associated with this person and that person via string theory. So calling someone a Nazi when there are worse Nazis out there is very dangerous.
Oh, well, in that, I love how you're doing this. And I'll tell you, I have to suffer that now based on just the modern culture. Like, it's so weird to be like under attack or be called names based on things I did. And I've had to really, over the last 2 years, really consider that. Like, did I do something wrong? And I listen back and I've listened to some of that stuff and I'm like, well, I did something ignorant. But I don't think it was wrong. I don't think it's wrong to make mistakes. It's just like, I guess that you could say in its thing, a mistake is wrong, but I don't know. I don't know. I didn't grow. I wasn't involved in any groups.
Right. So
I may have been ignorant, and someone can say that was wrong, but it's really weird to try to put that into a political context, anything more than it was just an ignorant thing I said. Like I said the N-word a couple times on record. And I used to stick up for that. Like, I will always use that word when I feel like it. And it was more like the comedians that were getting grief like 10 years ago for saying the N-word, the guy from Seinfeld did. And I was so pissed off about that. I was so angry about that. I'm like, he's in a comedy club. It's sacred. You can use the word there. But no, 10 years later, I won't use the word because it is uncomfortable to use. It does hurt people's feelings. And societal norms change, just like drinking and driving changed. It was acceptable. Now it's not. And I was just having this conversation with someone last night. She was so offended that the Civil War reenactment was pulled out of her town. And she was like, there was no vote, all this stuff. It was just 2 or 3 black people that stood up and said this. And I go, And she goes, how do you feel about it? Because I'm Mr. Free Speech to people. And I said, well, I think it was right that it was canceled. And she goes, what? And I go, I don't think it was right how they went about canceling it. I think they should have more debate and more conversation and explain to people and use it as a learning moment. Because that's what that is. Like, you have to explain to people it hurts our feelings. And as a whole of society, things have sort of shifted to a point where we have to consider people's feelings like that, so back when I said what I said, and I don't know if I would feel it if I were the same person. I'm not sure I would have done anything different even today. I think I would have been an angry young man that would say things to hurt people's feelings and to get you upset. But that didn't mean I believed what I was saying. Get what I'm saying? I was just saying it to get attention or to hurt people's feelings.
Look at shock jock culture. The time
but
period.
I'm talking about artists, and I'm expressing myself as I'm expressing myself as an artist. So I wonder why the visceral is always paid attention to in this country. The symptom, the rash, is you give a salve for the rash, but they never treat the illness. So why was it that I was so angry that I was looking to hurt people's feelings like that? Why? That question's never asked here. It's just like, he's a Nazi, not me. But if someone says something out of line, racial, they're attacked for having a political theory rather than just being an angry person. And when you look into the nuances and circumstances of their life, you're like, wow, that person is a grade school dropout. They don't have any parents, or their parents were, there's nuances and circumstances, and we have to look at the root cause of that anger versus just quickly attaching a political theory to it that is very serious. Having a political theory like saying I am a Nazi, like a Richard Spencer, there's a seriousness to that.
Oh, no, there's plenty of reasons he feels that way, but the other person just was looking for someone else to blame for their shit life.
Oh, by calling him a Nazi?
No, by saying a racist slur or blaming this person or that person, voting for someone because they're mad at the Mexican people or whatever, but they may not truly want someone to suffer. They're just quite angry because they're disenfranchised people, or they feel forgotten and ignorant.
See, those people I never understood because I was pretty apolitical. I was just looking to hurt people's feelings and get attention. I was looking to get attention. And if I hurt your feelings along the way, great. I wanted you to feel the pain I was feeling, and I wanted you to feel it deeply. And as an abused child, as a survivor of abuse, I wanted to abuse people, I guess. I wanted to hurt people like I was hurt. And I don't think that's ever looked at in these situations, like, where does that come from? And then when I look at it deeper, that's why I'm really a Bernie Sanders fan and stuff. When I look at it deeper, I'm like, well, of course my dad gave me, I'm holding my dad's anger and rage too. Like, he had to work 40 hours a week. When did he have a life? When do people have a life when they have to work 5 days a week? When do they get to have time with their family? When can he even be a father? When can a mother be a mother when they're working 5 days a week? They come home, grocery shop one day, do laundry, and then one day they sleep and get ready for work the next week. It's like, what an awful existence we have in this world, in this country especially. Or in this country is what I know. I don't know about the rest of the world. And so I can only say, like, I think a lot of that ignorance or that anger is manifest from my mother didn't have time to spend with me. My father didn't have time to spend as a father. Maybe they would have been better parents had they not worked so much for so little. And my family comes from, like, my dad was a union pipe fitter. So it's not like he didn't make decent money. He made okay money and had insurance and stuff. But man, when did they get time with us? So how could I not be angry? And I remember this white supremacist kid saying, this Chris Piccolini from Life After Hate, him talking about why did he join and become a Nazi, join the political party, be a Nazi. He was an actual Nazi, subscribing member. He's like, when he found someone that was giving him attention, he took it and he ran. They gave him attention. So he was like, great, I love this. I'm loved here. My parents don't have time. They're working too much. And so I see capitalism a lot of times as at least the form of capitalism we practice in this country, as being at the root of a lot of our problems. It's a violent system, and violent communication is going to come out of it. So me wanting to hurt your feelings is the same hurt that my parents went through, that I went through. That's how I see it.
So the system sort of causes a cycle of abuse.
I think so. I think so.
See that?
I don't see where my father ever got relief except drinking after work. You know, he drank after work, and that's where he got his relief. I think if you're working 3 days and you have 4 days to your family and yourself, maybe you can find a day on your own to have a hobby, to garden, to build a ship out of toothpicks, you know, do something that's going to meditate. But I never saw any of that. Like when people talk about self-care, I grew up in a class of person that was like, what the fuck is self-care? They barely have time to brush their teeth. Their teeth are rotting out of their head for a reason, because they don't have time to brush their teeth. And I know
go to the
people
doctor when you have a broken leg.
Right. So what the fuck is self-care about, man? That's crazy talk. Like, but it's true. We do need time for self-care. It's not crazy talk, actually. But it's crazy to hear from a person who never understood it. Like that's, oh my God. What an awful country we have. Like people don't have insurance, like to go see a doctor when they break their arm. So it's like, I think that's where the root of a lot of this stuff is. And then there's these assholes, Richard Spencers, who have had all the privilege, who are decided to use their education and go, this is where I'm at. This is what I believe. And this is what I want to enact on society. And I want to use all of these ignorant bastards to do it. And that's what I saw, of course, and we've spoke about this before. I saw that in the Satanic Temple manifesting. Like, we want to use these ignorant bastards to bend our will, to bend things our way.
So, Richard Spencer also literally has minions in that sense. Same with these Gavin McGuiness types, with Proud Boys and things like that. It's the same thing of these people did not have hard childhoods, I don't think. I think they're quite privileged.
They certainly have come from some place of privilege, and you can see it based on their communication. How they communicate is of an educated communication. And they make fun of people who aren't educated. Now they don't. They've curtailed that, but you can guarantee go back on any of their careers and they're making juggalo jokes, let's say. Now that they're looking to get a lobbyist group together or a political theory together, get troops, they're definitely kind to the poor person and the ignorant masses. But they're not. I guarantee you can find a whole history of them beating the shit out of lower classes. Yeah, of course they come from privilege. I mean, if you have an education, if you have a technical education, you have some sort of privilege. Even if you got there off the reservation, you know, you have a form of privilege that a lot of people don't have.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and tune into our next episode wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. You can find us at Speak of the Devil Pod on Twitter and contact us at speakofthedevilpod@gmail.com. For Shane's artwork or to support his endeavors, please visit ShaneBugby.com or find him on Twitter at ShaneBugby. I've been Nannerl. Have a good one.
Oh, and ShaneIsTheDevil.com.